Well, it happened about, oh gosh, probably now almost 20 years ago. I started to lose people. It just felt like dominoes. One person after the next, close to me died. And I wanted to talk about it. I mean, I couldn't understand what was happening all of a sudden, you know. And of course, I was also thinking like I'm next. I better talk about this because I have no idea what's coming down the pipe. So I started having what I call death and dining dinners. And I invited my friends, and they were relatively willing to talk about it for a dinner, you know. So we would have appies and talk about one thing and preparation, and then we'd have the main course and talking about dying, and then we'd do dessert and talk about the afterlife. So I had it kind of organized, so we would cover the topic. But then a friend of mine said, you know, you should really be offering this at a community center or something. And she was on the board of the Roundhouse out here in Vancouver. And so she sort of sent me over there, and they said, oh, sure, we'll do the Art of Dying. So I started offering these Art of Dying workshops, which then I had to kind of get serious and get a workbook and figure out what to do over there. And I have done them now ever since, probably 2 or 3 times a year.
Welcome to the MAPS Canada podcast. My name is Rielle Capler, and I will be your host for this episode with my guest, Susan Wright. This podcast is for educational purposes only. It does not constitute medical, legal, or professional advice. Always seek the advice of qualified healthcare provider or other appropriate professional with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition, legal questions, or other matters. This month at MAPS Canada, we are focusing on the theme of end-of-life care and psychedelics. Studies have shown the potential benefits of psychedelics for easing end-of-life anxiety and distress, and legal access to psychedelics has been authorized in Canada for this purpose. Today, I want to explore this topic with Susan. I heard about Susan from one of her colleagues and was beyond intrigued. We had the chance to meet a few weeks ago, and I was not disappointed. I asked Susan if we could record a conversation for our podcast and was really thankful that Susan agreed. Susan, thank you for joining me today for this conversation.
Happy to.
You are currently doing a master's degree in theology. As a lifelong learner myself, I find this very inspiring. Can you share with us a little bit about the program and the path that brought you here at this stage in your life?
Yes, it has been a journey of the unexpected, I would say. I have been a lifelong learner, and so I've gone back to school a number of times, but I thought I was done, you know, at my tender age. I figured I was finished with that until just serendipitously, this business of being a theologian fell in my lap, and I can't really explain it. It just happened through a series of synchronicities, of coincidences with friends, and suddenly there I was kind of at the Vancouver School of Theology and doing a master's degree in public and pastoral leadership. So I've been a leader all my life. That's not new, but I'm not religious. I do not have a church. I've experimented with a variety of religious ideas, but never landed. And so the idea of me going to a school of theology was really like right out of the blue. But I have thoroughly enjoyed it. I'm now in my 3rd year, so I have completed most of the courses that are required and really enjoyed them, mostly from an historical point of view, but also just beginning to understand some of the stories and contexts and perspectives behind what you learn in Sunday school, which is basically where I left it off. So it's been quite a journey, and I feel as though it has transformed me in a number of ways. And so it's been a really interesting journey and continues, of course. I'm not finished yet.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like it. I'm curious, like, what were you doing before that? How did your life go before that led you to this?
Yeah, well, I have had a number of different careers, usually partnered with education. And so I started out as a designer and worked on interior design mostly for a number of years, and then got bored with that, went back to school and did a master's in environmental studies, thinking that I would study organizational environments, built environments. But I got, again, serendipity. I got hooked into a professor whose name was Eric Trist, who came from the Wharton School in Pennsylvania, and he was really a wizard in organizational environments. And so I got really interested in his work and studied with him for a number of years, and then ended up going back into corporate life, this time as an organization development consultant. And so I worked at that for quite a long while and really enjoyed it thoroughly, and thought that I might be an academic and go back to environmental studies and maybe teach. And so I saw an ad for a professorship and thought I would apply, but I didn't have a doctorate. And so I went down the street and applied for one so that I could submit my application for this professorship. And what happened, of course, was that I didn't get the job, but I did get the doctorate. So I went to the University of Toronto, to OISE, for those who know the Ontario Institute for Studies in Education, and studied leadership. And it turned out to be a kind of real turning point for me. I did go back into corporate life for another 8 years roughly after that, to practice what I had learned about leadership in turbulent times, which is what my doctorate was about. And then actually, we were just talking about, I was talking about this with a friend this morning. I got fired. The organization kind of came apart. I got fired. And a friend of mine said, you have to try this coaching program. It's a transition program for people like you. And so I went to the Hudson Institute in Santa Barbara, California, and became a coach. And stayed on and taught with the Frederick Hudson, who ran the Hudson Institute for 5 years. And so you can kind of see this kind of serendipity here, there, everywhere. So I was a coach. I set up my own business called The Coaching Project, and worked on that for years, and kind of faded into the background with that and thought that I'd be finished. So that was, I had one more call, and that was to an integral theory program. A friend of mine asked me what I knew about consciousness, and I didn't know anything, hadn't learned anything, didn't feel like I knew anything, and I was a fan of Ken Wilber's, so I went and did an integral theory master's degree in California. So that was the last one, and really thought I was finished after that. But here I am. Here I am doing it all over again. Another call, that just seems like they keep coming. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's great that you're listening to them and following that.
Yeah, well, it does seem so, yeah.
Yeah, and that's interesting about the consciousness and then moving into theology.
Yeah.
Hey, we hope you're enjoying the podcast so far. Now, if you want to support and become part of the psychedelic movement, feel free to donate to MAPS Canada at the link in the description below. Thank you for helping our mission to support equitable access to legal and regulated psychedelic medicines for all Canadians.
When I met with you, you showed me around a lovely, humble space in the heart of the community that you live in.
Yeah.
And you explained to me what it was for and how it came about and how it was part of your studies. Can you give us a verbal tour so you can paint a picture in the minds of the listeners? They can't see what I saw, and explain the connection it has to your program and your vision.
Sure. Well, it's another one of these serendipity moments. I thought I was going to do mission work for my practical part of my degree. There's 2 years of courses and 1 year where you have to practice what you're going to preach, except I'm not going to preach. So I thought I would do something else. I thought I was going to do mission work in Mexico, but it turned out that the group that I was associated with had some policies that I could not agree with, and so I was kind of left. I was feeling really disappointed. And there's a cafe around the corner from me that's called the Convivial Cafe. And so I was wandering by. I'd been by this place like hundreds of times. Suddenly, it just jumped out at me and said, "This is your place." And so it was a place for sale, a little storefront, like about 15 feet wide and 30 feet deep, with a kitchen and bathroom at the back, and a door and a glass window at the front. So that's kind of it. And so I bought it, and not knowing what I would do, but just thinking, well, maybe this is a place that I can do something that will sort of give me my practical piece of this degree. And I mean, I'm not going to be a minister. I am not going to sit at bedsides and help people, who are in need. And so I knew it was going to be something off the wall, but I didn't know it was going to be this until I found it. And so my grandson actually drove me to IKEA, and we bought all the furniture for it. Everything folds and stacks and shoves on casters over to the walls. And so it's a multi-purpose, multi-use kind of small space for groups. And my vision is to offer it to my neighborhood here in South Falls Creek as a place to gather, just based on what we know about isolation, alienation, loneliness, depression. I mean, all of that, particularly post-COVID. I mean, I don't think we've come out yet in ways that are healthy. And so that was at the back of my mind. And so I just began. I had a couple of open house events. I gathered a group of fellow facilitators and counselors and that kind of thing. There are about a dozen of us, and called them the Inner Circle of Circles in the Square. It's in Leg and Boot Square, I should say, and that's why circles seemed appropriate in the square. And so leg and Boot Square and Circles in the Square, and then the Inner Circle of colleagues. And I just started to offer programs. And so many of my colleagues and friends offer programs. We've got chanting, we've got collage, we've got photography, sacred photography. I've offered programs in, and we'll get to this, in dying, the art of dying, I call it, memoir writing, and reflecting on aging, because there's quite a seniors population in the community. And so that was the offering out. What's happened is that a number of people, almost a balance of both ways, a number of people in the community have come forward and said, can we use your space? Can we hold our Aboriginal feast in your space? Can we hold our book club or our constellation circle or whatever it is? And so it's been just a lovely kind of balance of coming forward from the community and then offering things out into the community. And so it's been fantastic so far. It's about 6 months old, so we're just getting started.
Yeah, that's interesting about just having a place and what can happen when you have a space.
Yes, a place.
Place where people can come and do things. It's a really great offering for your community. And how are you tying that into your course?
Well, it will be the practicum, I guess, for my degree. So I'm actually writing about it as a sacred space and following along to see what happens. I have I've decided that the purpose that I'm back at school is actually to discover my own theology. And I'm calling that Love in Action. And so I've got a poster up that describes what I mean by that. And I'm anxious to see, just over the time that I am in school, how love in action emerges in this space. Part of it will be the way we show up as we offer things into the community, and then I'm anxious to see how the community feels about the space when they're there. Do they feel that it's a healing? I had a note from one of the facilitators the other day, and she said, "This is so great. I hope you can feel all the healing that's going on here." So I thought that was so lovely, because that's my hope, is that there will be, it's a gift for the community, but I hope that it is a sort of healing, a sacred space that's helpful to people in a variety of ways.
Mm-hmm. When I met with you, we did talk about the art of dying in your program, and you shared with me a notebook, like your workshop. Can you share more about that? How did that come about, and what is that offering?
Well, it happened about, probably now almost 20 years ago. I started to lose people. It just felt like dominoes. One person after the next, close to me, died. And I wanted to talk about it. I couldn't understand what was happening all of a sudden, And of course, I was also thinking, like, I'm next. I better talk about this, because I have no idea what's coming down the pipe. So I started having what I call death and dining dinners. And I invited my friends, and they were relatively willing to talk about it for a dinner, so we would have appies and talk about one thing, and preparation, and then we'd have the main course and talking about dying, and then we'd do dessert and talk about the afterlife. So I had it kind of organized so we would cover the topic. But then a friend of mine said, you should really be offering this at a community center or something. And she was on the board of the Roundhouse out here in Vancouver. And so she sort of sent me over there, and they said, "Oh, sure, we'll do the Art of Dying." So I started offering these Art of Dying workshops, which then I had to kind of get serious and get a workbook and figure out what to do over there. And I have done them now ever since, probably 2 or 3 times a year. And so I'm, of course, offering them also over at Circles in the Square as one of the workshops that we're engaged with the community in. So we're about halfway through the one that's going right now. Mm-hmm. Using the workbook and working through the stages in preparation. And I call it the Art of Dying because I wanted it to be not a really heavy duty kind of thing. And so each of the sessions, there are 6, has some way of expression through art. So we do lifelines, which are those drawings where you go up and down and show how your life is done. We do storyboards at the end where people do a collage of all that they've learned and prepared for, and a whole variety of different things. So there's a whole variety of ways in which people express through art what they are learning about their preparation for their dying. And it seems to be a good way to allow people into the subject without a lot of heaviness, I guess I would say, or fright, fear, fear of the topic.
Yeah, it's I'm interested, as we're exploring this use of psychedelics at that time. We have seen that there's some research that is showing that there can be potential uses of psychedelics for end-of-life anxiety and distress. And I'm curious how you see psychedelics possibly being part of this work for preparation, and for how it might support preparation for the person facing death. We're all facing death, but so at different stages when people want to start exploring their own death, and for the people, people who are supporting others as they go through that transition. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think psychedelics is a wonderful opening into other realms in general. And certainly dying is one of those. I mean, um, we are fearful of what we cannot see, and I think psychedelics to me is a way of seeing what is beyond our normal tangible reality. And once you see into that other reality, you see death as part of your journey. I mean, it's simply part of a journey. And so in my psychedelic journeys, I have experienced my death. I have met the people who are going to be there. I've experienced that sense of being complete. I've even, on one occasion, chosen to return. And I had an option. I had an option to not, and I did. And so, all of that is in a different realm of reality from the day to day. But I think it's so important because it allows you to experience the different. I guess it's a different reality that you are about to enter before you do. And so it's a rehearsal in a way, and I think it opens you up to what the possibilities are rather than the kind of fear response. And so you get to practice. And I think for caregivers, for people who are with others who are dying, it I would think would certainly give me a really, really nice kind of relaxing sense that the person was taken care of. That this was going to actually be something that would help in the transition, in the dying process, to be taken care of, to know that you are held, to know that you're taken care of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was thinking about this, just how there's also this experience with psychedelics of you learn how to let go into the unknown.
Yes.
So I was thinking that it's almost like a practice of that experience of how to feel comfortable in those potentially scary times of letting go, and it's and learning it in in an embodied way.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I studied with Ralph Metzner, who was one of the original Harvard team for a number of years. And I mean, I think it's really important that it not be sort of so-called recreational. I mean, I think it needs to be guided and informed and safe in order for it to do its work properly. So I think there is that aspect always to it, that it's not something you just do because you want to experience another realm or whatever. But that letting go that you describe, I think partly comes from that sense of being in a sacred space. Using a medicine that allows you to experience that sense of letting go safely, so that you're not afraid, and you're not sort of in anxiety. You really are letting go, and I think that's it. I mean, it's a really good practice.
Yeah. And I was thinking too about for being there for your loved ones as they go through that transition. I was listening to another podcast we had done in the past with Richard Adamson, and he was talking about that, being able to deal with, his own, fears and anxiety and existential issues in advance about his, wife's imminent passing. Working through that in advance allowed him to be able to be present with her, for her, without being caught up in his own, fears in the moment.
Isn't that wonderful? Yes. What a wonderful gift to them both, right? Yeah. Yeah. Because I mean, grief starts for most of us long before people die. You know, if we know there is that coming, then we are already grieving, and so to soften those edges, I can imagine, would be a real gift, and to the dying person as well, as you say. You know, just lovely, lovely. Yeah.
And yeah, and I was thinking when you showed me your program, we started talking about it when we met, but just how it would be so, interesting and great to be able to create some kind of program
Oh,
where, there was that, what you're doing, the art of dying, but also including the psychedelics as
yes.
part of that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it would be. I would love to try that. I would love that. Yeah, that's something to put on our calendars for sure.
Definitely.
We'll do it.
Yeah,
Because I
let's
think,
do that.
yeah, most of this program is preparatory. You know, we spend the first couple of, well, we have an introduction, and then we spend the first week looking back at how dying has been viewed. So you get a kind of a sense of its evolution in different cultures and the different way it's practiced and how different people feel about it. So there's a kind of cracking open. And then the next part of it is what constitutes a good death. And there's a lot been written about this and near-death experiences and all that kind of thing. But again, it gives you a kind of vision of where you're headed. And I think to be able to actually then take that on a journey of discovery would be fabulous. It fits very nicely, I think, with the idea that you are, on a journey of figuring out how this is going to proceed, and then how you're going to, I mean, we do a fair bit of practical work as well. Do you have a will and a power of attorney and all that kind of thing. But I think the catalyst for being prepared and being comfortable with all that sort of preparation would be so helped by a psychedelic experience that was guided, and it's just sort of practice, as you say.
Yeah. And then I was also thinking about how that the kind of work you're doing, like the workshops, but then potentially also psychedelics, might also be something that could support, grieving, and people who after the fact, who are grieving, and also just integrating this loss and this loss of this person in their lives, and because with psychedelics, there's a big part of preparation and integration. And it seems that this change, which is really significant when you lose somebody in your life, is one of those integration moments.
It is. Yes, it is. And I think psychedelics also, it expands your horizons. And I think that's, when you're grieving, it's so up close, and so the idea of having an experience of just expansion, I see, where this is going. I see where you may be, or I see you as sort of in fullness rather than in, sort of an embodied way. I think is a nice fit too.
There's a lot to explore in this realm.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
One of
Sure.
the things that we were also looking at this month at MAPS Canada is the issue of offering psychedelic treatments before assisted dying. We have the MAID programs in Canada,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you, that's something that's accessible now and people are using, but psychedelics aren't as accessible as
Right.
MAID. And just looking at that, that offering of how that could be part of it, something that's offered as either to if somebody is experiencing a lot of, distress and anxiety, it might be something that helps them, um, and might give them a different perspective,
Yeah.
and also support them before the MAID process.
Yeah. Oh, I could see that absolutely. Yeah, I could see it being a really, again, it's the idea that I think well guided, it is a way to reduce the fear and anxiety and all of that surrounds even MAID. I mean, it's still a transition, and both for the caregiver and for the person themselves. It's a way of just expanding the space to such an extent that it's not that the fear disappears. There's always, a mixture of grief and fear and all of that in the transition, but I think it just softens the edges dramatically.
Speaking about spaces and places, you are also involved in a really interesting project, that's with the Conscious Land Bank.
Yes,
And
yes.
you have a vision for creating consciousness centers. Can you tell us more about that vision and where it came from?
Yeah, well, speaking of dying, this came from my dear friend Eileen Page's legacy. She died a few months ago, but had enough time in her process to make arrangements for her legacy. So she had a couple of years where she knew that there would be an end, but it wasn't today, and it wasn't next month even. And so she wanted to do something with what she left behind. And so she gathered groups of individuals and asked them, like, what would something, she was very interested in consciousness, and mostly as a result of her psychedelic experiences. She really believed that extending, developing, supporting consciousness was the portal to the future, and that through that we can develop as human beings, and this is the way forward. And so in the end, she and our colleague Rob and I set up what is now called the Conscious Land Bank Network. And it's a public benefit corporation, and the idea is that we would acquire land in perpetuity for the purpose of raising consciousness. That was Eileen's wish. And so we are setting about doing that. and so we're looking for charitable organizations with whom to partner, who would actually deliver the programming, including organizations like MAPS Canada, the programming for consciousness raising in all sorts of ways. I mean, some of the things that we're doing just at Circles in the Square, you could see as consciousness raising. I mean, we're just trying to expand the space for people. And so we envision the charitable organizations being humanity centers, and that we would have, we would try to use Eileen's legacy as seed money for funding a variety of these humanity centers that would be charitable organizations working to develop consciousness, hopefully, I mean, across Canada, maybe even around the world, who knows? So it's early days, we're just starting, but we have, we have what's called a wisdom circle, which is a group of Eileen's close-ins, and we're working to see how we might make this happen. And so it's kind of developing on a number of fronts, and pretty exciting. And so we'll see where it goes. But it has the potential, I think, to be a really exciting and innovative and progressive way to see consciousness develop in the world.
It's interesting that you had in the past, studied consciousness, and
Yeah,
it's kind of coming full circle in a way for you
it
to
is.
now try to put that into the world, like support consciousness
Yes,
in the
yes,
world.
yeah. And of
Yeah.
course, psychedelics is so beautiful for that purpose. It just it's just I mean, we're all evolving, right, all the time, and sometimes in big ways and sometimes in small, but we're all getting there. But I think the benefit, the sort of purpose of psychedelics in a way is just to speed that process, to give people experiences that they can then take back into their lives and express in a variety of ways that are different than they might have been able to access had they not had the experience.
And as individuals, there's that kind of growth, but then with the having centers that kind of brings
Yes,
it into more societal rather
yes,
than
yes.
individual.
Yes, yes, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, it has to scale, right? It has to scale if it's going to do any good. And so part of it is, yes, how do we scale it? And so humanity centers are one way to do that.
That's
Yeah.
really interesting. So what do you plan to do with your degree, your theology
Well,
degree?
I
It
will,
sounds like
I
you're
will,
already
I will,
doing it.
I will roll up the piece of paper and put it with the other pieces of paper. Yeah, no, probably not a lot. At this stage of my life, I'm not sure what's kind of coming. But I hope that, uh, particularly this idea of the conscious land bank and the humanity centers. I mean, I think that's where maybe I'm headed, and so when I finish this, I think. Really devoting. I mean, I feel like I'm kind of trying to do everything at once right now. But when I'm finished, I think really devoting some time to this, to see where it can go and how to generate knowledge and understanding about the ideas so that we can then maybe find funding and expand our own horizons. So yeah, societally, as you say,
Yeah, it does
would be
sound like you're
great.
going to be using that degree very much for this. Um, I guess
So pastoring, I don't know. I guess so. I guess this is
consciousness,
pastoring, public and
consciousness,
passion,
consciousness pastoring.
consciousness,
Yeah,
for sure,
consciousness
for
pastoring.
sure.
And I guess just one thing that's just coming to mind now is just how psychedelics. We talked about how psychedelics fits in with that and is a good fit, but in terms of its availability, like right now it's available for to be authorized for exceptional
Right.
circumstances. How could you see psychedelics being you know accessible, or what needs to happen to be able to incorporate psychedelics into these things, like preparing for death and
Yeah.
integrating the death of a loved one, where it's not a medical condition.
Right, right. Yeah, well, I think it's inevitable almost that it comes because there is uh, there's such a lot of evidence that it's helpful. I think obviously organizations like MAPS. I mean, and the studies that you're doing and the evidence that you're collecting is absolutely critical. I think to getting that kind of broad approval. And I think that the underground, of course, is alive and well and working on this too. And so there are a whole variety of streams of experience that are, I think, coming together and at some point will merge into something. Who knows what that might look like? But I see it as it's almost it's the new growth, the sort of birthing that is kind of parallel in some way to the destruction that we see around us. You know, things are falling apart. There's no doubt about that. Systems, organizations, all of that. We see there's a big transition coming, and so it's going to mean death on a social, on a planetary level to a significant extent. We don't know how or when or how or why, but or we don't know how or when, but we do know that it's coming, and it's in fact probably pretty much upon us as we speak. But I think there's something being born on the other side. And what's being born on the other side is this consciousness, this new consciousness, and it's an evolutionary process. It's been happening since the beginning of time, so it's nothing new in a way. But I think we are. I think you said it earlier. We are at a tipping point, and so the work that we're doing to develop consciousness and the use of psychedelics in that work, I think, is absolutely critical now. And I don't see it ending the way it did in the 50s, when there wasn't the kind of surround sound that there is now to urge it forward.
I very much look forward to seeing, to seeing what you're creating, and that putting energy into what needs to be born as other thing as we're going through this evolution time, as this change. So I love that you're putting your energy into that, and it's such a pleasure to get to know you and to hopefully work and collaborate on some of these exciting projects together.
So.
Yeah,
I hope so. Yeah,
are there...
yeah, really fun.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much for having this conversation, and I'm sure we'll have many more.
Yes, I am too. Thank you, Rielle.
Thank you.
Bye for now.
Bye for now.